Hey everyone, this is Dr. Casey Johnson. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I know you're going to love today's episode with Tara Kemp. Tara is doing some amazing work, so I'm excited to have her on to share a story with you guys. If you've been loving the Unlock Wellness podcast, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. The Unlock Wellness podcast is now on patreon.com. Patreon is an amazing site that allows you to support your favorite podcast. So whether it's $1 per month or 10 or 20, it's an amazing way to help support the Unlock Wellness podcast. But if you're unable to at this time, I still love you. The podcast will always be free. But the podcast has been growing a lot, and using Patreon will help me slowly improve recording equipment so I can get you guys the best sound quality possible, as well as help me decrease the need to use sponsored ads in the episode. I'm definitely not against sponsorships by any means, but I do respect your time as listeners, and I don't want to have to overload the podcast with a bunch of ads. So if you do want to support using Patreon, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Dr. Casey Johnson. There's even fun incentives for supporting, like shirts and stickers, so be sure to check it out. Also be sure to follow me on social media to keep up with the latest podcast episodes. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. My username across the board is at Dr. Casey Johnson. That's DrKaseyJohnson. You can also check out my website at drcaseyjohnson.com. It has all of the past podcast episodes and more information about each guest under the Listen tab. While you're on my site, also be sure to check out the Shop tab, where you can check out my first book of my Healthy Children's Book series and learn about the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. Thank you again for listening. I hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to start making positive changes to your health. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Tara Kemp. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Tara Kemp. I was connected to Tara through past podcast guest Adam Sudd, so be sure to go check out his episode as well. He's amazing. But Tara has done a lot of positive work in the plant-based world, most recently just contributing a lot to the amazing program called Mastering Diabetes. And she's actually getting ready to embark on a whole new adventure, which I'm excited for her to share that with me as well. So, but Tara, just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm excited to have you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here, and I'm also a huge fan of Adam Sudd, so everyone definitely go check out his episode. But yeah, I'm thrilled to be here, so thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tara, we're just going to jump into your backstory. So first off, where you're from, and just, what your health and wellness look like at a young age, and really just how that's progressed over time to where you are right now.
Wow, that's a huge question. So, yeah. So I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, and had, an awesome childhood. My parents were always pretty health conscious. Even today, my mom is 66 and my dad's 61, and neither of them are taking any medications, and they are still like hiking and biking and sailing and rock climbing and like all the things. So I definitely grew up in a active, health conscious household, but also, I was part of like the average world and had my fair share of, French fries and burgers and fast food on the way home from gymnastics practices and all of that stuff. And but just because I grew up an athlete with like a generally health conscious family, thankfully I haven't really experienced huge chronic disease experiences the way that most people do in this country. I'm also still young, and oftentimes that doesn't catch up to people until they're older, but I've actually lived a pretty generally healthy life. The biggest thing for me actually was that when I was younger, kind of started developing when I was like 13, 14 years old, I had an eating disorder. So I actually came from the opposite side of the spectrum, where like most people are dealing with, an excess of food and things. And I was actually restricting and went through my own journey with that, but it really ultimately in the end led me to a place of being very conscious and aware of what I eat. And even though that can sometimes have a negative effect on you, I think that it can also, when you are mindful about it and have the right intentions and able to look at it from a healthy place, it actually can be really beneficial. So ultimately, I think it, in the end, has served me because it brought me to plant-based nutrition. I mean, having that disordered relationship with food really put me on a path of seeking to find a way to live in harmony with what we eat and to not feel like I was, tiptoeing around things. And I really was able to come to a place of just being so grateful for food and feeling so connected to food and more connected to my body. And I mean, it pushed me to do a lot of inner work that ultimately has served me. So that's kind of what led me to plant-based nutrition, is that I was just very interested in health, and I heard about the health benefits of a plant-based diet. And this was, years after, I went vegan when I was 19. So that was quite a few years after the eating disorder had really run its course. But I would also say that I was still kind of seeking, I just really believed that, all of these different conflicting ideas about this is good for you, this is bad for you, this is,
Right.
I didn't find anything that really felt like I'd found the holy grail yet, in which food was working with our bodies, because I felt like it was out there, but I just couldn't find it.
Were you trying different diets and stuff, or were you bouncing around, or not really, just because you weren't really sure?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I was trying different diets. I think that from a young age, despite having an eating disorder, I also was very logical. I don't want to say that in a way that says that the people who try fad diets aren't logical, but just my mindset, I could see through things, and I was very much in disbelief that a particular things just didn't make sense to me to cut out certain things, or just go to decide that portions and calorie counting, I knew those weren't the paths that I wanted to take. I knew that I knew that I was seeking something bigger than that, and something just more intuitive. And so when I found plant-based nutrition, that's really what it felt like, was oh my gosh, there's this way to eat that fully serves and nourishes us. And then the more I learned about it, it was this not only supports our own health and well-being, but also works in harmony with the world around us. And so when I found out about plant-based diets and started looking into it more and tried it out for myself, I felt better. I felt like my recovery times improved because I was an athlete. My digestion improved. I'd been taking pills for my digestion because it was so out of whack, and
which I'm sure felt bad to you too, because you were saying, you did have that more logical mindset in your mind where you're this, I shouldn't have to take this for the rest of my life if that's what true health is. If
totally.
Get rid of it, then it should get rid of it. I shouldn't have to take it every single day for me to stay on track.
Yeah. So yeah, and kind of around that time, as I was starting to get more in touch with my body, I even had been on birth control pills since I was really young, just because when I had the eating disorder, I lost my menstrual cycle, and for whatever reason, rather than looking into why this was happening, my doctors just put me on birth control at age 14.
Crazy.
So yeah, I'd only had my period for a year, and then suddenly I was on birth control for the
Tara, why do you think just because you have done a lot of inner work, do you have an idea of, I mean, I know it's probably a bunch of different things, but why you did turn to having an eating disorder? Do you feel like it was a control thing, or did you feel like you had the pressures physically from being an athlete, or do you know what it is?
Yeah, I mean, it was 100% a control thing. Honestly, the vast majority of eating disorders don't start from really body image issues. I know that often comes with it and is part of the territory, but it's a mental disorder. It's coming from some sort of hurt or a trauma or wound that you don't know how to deal with. And for me, I was an anxious kid, and I dealt with a lot of anxieties, and I really felt like I was kind of a victim to my brain and my fears. And the eating disorder developed at a time when I was going through a period of a lot of shifts in my life. I had been a gymnast all of my life, and I started developing all of these mental blocks against these skills that physically I had the capability to do. But I was suddenly starting to like question all of them. And I mean, it's understandable. Like the things that a gymnast does are like dangerous and scary. Crazy. And someone who like sits there and watches the Olympics is like, well, yeah, I can understand why doing backflips on a balance beam suspended like 3 feet and 4 feet in the air, like that would be scary. But the thing is that like I had the ability to do those skills. I'd trained them my entire life, and suddenly I was having all these mental blocks, and it just went on for a long time and grew. And I eventually had to quit gymnastics, and all of my friends were gymnasts. Like I spent all of my time at the gym. So I didn't really like invest my time in making friends at school. I had like friends in my classes. I wasn't like a loner. I was very happy at school, but those aren't the people that I spent time with outside of school. Outside of class, I spent all of my time with my friends from gymnastics, and that was my identity. Like I was Tara the gymnast. So losing my social life and my identity and like all of these things was kind of like disintegrating and crashing down in a way. And at the same time, I was feeling all this shame because I knew that physically I could do these skills and that I was the only one holding myself back, but that I didn't really know how to handle it. And it had just become overwhelming. Like I can remember like sitting in class and just being afraid that I would then get to gymnastics practice later and be afraid. Like you become afraid of the fear itself. And so I was dealing with a lot of, all of that. And that's kind of like a big storm to deal with when you're like 13, 14 years old. So yeah, the eating disorder for me, I think really stemmed from feeling needing a sense of control. And so for me, yeah, that's where it came from. Of course, like, most of that comes in retrospect. It's not like at the time I had the clarity and understanding to know that, but in time, looking back and kind of processing through everything, I think that's definitely where it came from. And yeah, we find comfort in that. We all, as much as there are some people who are more flexible and able to go with the flow than others, I think that we all find our ways of comforting ourselves and feeling safe, even if we know that those things aren't actually serving us. Mm-hmm. And that, we have these habits that we want to break free from. The fear of change and the potential pain of change is harder for us to go toward than letting go of the pain that we're dealing with right now, because we're comfortable in that pain. We feel safe in that pain. We know what that pain is like, it's so fascinating.
It really is. I mean, just like there's that fear of getting out of your comfort zone, like you just said. It's like, yeah, like people know if they're making a harmful decision, or people know like what it takes to, change the way you eat, or, change the way you work out, and like how to be healthy. I mean, for the most part, right? It's just like, but people are afraid of just changing that day to day, or like the social pressure, just getting out of the comfort zone, which is ultimately where, I mean, everybody needs to be to really thrive and reach their potential.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, with the eating disorder, how long did that last? Or did it go until you really started to dive in to the plant-based eating?
Yeah, the healing journey is not linear and not always having a specific start date and a specific end date. But basically, it was a period of ups and downs. I would say that there was the initial period where it only lasted, I'd say, like maybe 6 months to a year, where I was really restricting. And it kind of came on. I didn't even realize that's what I was doing until a few months in, and it was pointed out to me that I had lost so much weight. And anyways, so it was like, a few months to a year where it was like, really in the thick of it. And then after that, like I did have the realization that I didn't want to be doing that anymore, but you get into a state where you've lost touch with your body's natural hunger signals. And this, I think, is the case for all types of disordered eating. And of course it comes in, there's a spectrum of like how deep into that it goes, but whether someone is overeating and binge eating and emotionally eating, or whether someone is restricting, like you get to a place where you're out of touch with your body's cues and you forget how to just eat naturally like you did when you were a child, when you were just like, oh yeah, like I'll just keep eating this until I'm full and then I'll stop. And oh, I'm in the mood for this, so I'll have it. Like you really lose touch with that. So there was a reintegration process that I was kind of struggling through. So I definitely was in a recovery mindset, but the process of actually getting back in touch with intuitively eating and doing it healthfully, it was a process. Yeah. And I also, in the period where I had lost a ton of weight, I had started, I was open to going to doctors with my mom, but basically what I heard time after time, these doctors saying is like, oh, just start putting butter on everything, or like, oh, just start eating a Snickers bar at night. Like, and I knew that that's not how I wanted to do this. Like, that's not how I wanted to like get my health back, was by adding all these foods that I knew were unhealthy. So none of the approaches that people were giving me were helpful. So I kind of built up this like distrust for these people of authority who were supposed to be able to help me in the medical field. I just felt like none of them were offering me solutions that actually felt helpful. And so I kind of felt very alone and on my own in figuring things out. And so I was kind of just doing my own process. And that, again, that led through periods of being like, okay, you know what? Like, I know that I need to gain weight and I'm just going to like, eat kind of not like anything, but like, I'm going to, eat these things that are like higher fat foods, higher calorie foods, a little more like more processed foods, like whatever. I was just like, I need to get healthier. And then I would go through periods where I was like, no, I know I want to gain weight, but I need to eat the healthiest thing possible. And then it became almost like an orthorexia type thing for a little while. So it had its ups and downs, but I definitely, it's so interesting because kind of at the same time that I was very much in a recovery, like I said, mindset. I was very dedicated to like coming into a place of feeling peace with food and, getting my body back into a healthy state. And I was watching my teammates. I was on the track and cross country teams, and I was watching my teammates deal with their own struggles and watching my coaches handle those, or, inspire those. I guess inspire is probably not the correct word there, but instigate those in unhealthy ways. And I would watch it happen and know that like I did not want to be part of that. Like I can remember one time one of my track coaches like asked me what I was going to have for dinner before a meet, and me being like, I'm sorry, like I'm not going to talk about what I'm eating with you. Like, right.
Well, what kind of advice were they giving people? I never did track. Like, I don't know that world like at all.
So I would say that they had like the coaches that I had our best interest in mind and thought that they were doing their best. But when it comes to young athletes, young people in general, especially young women who are going through puberty and who are having changing bodies, it has to be delicately approached. Right. And I think that so much more emphasis could have been put on just like celebrating healthy foods, but emphasis was put on, having a lean figure. And I can remember a coach like talking to one of the girls and telling her like to count how many grams of fat she had per day and making sure it was under a certain number. And, there were a number of girls on my team that ended up having eating disorders. And it was really sad to watch that. And I think that a lot of it went unnoticed by the coaches initially. So yeah, it's definitely an area where there's room for so much growth. And that's actually when I was in high school, watching all of that happen is what inspired me to originally think that I wanted to be a dietitian. And I then went through like, changing my mind about that and things like that. But when I was in high school, I was like, I'm going to be a sports dietitian. I'm going to go talk to high school athletes so that they can understand how to think about food healthfully, because it's a huge, like, nutrition is a huge part of being an athlete. You're so in touch with your body. You want to do the best for it. But just talking about staying slim for races, or, on the opposite side of that, just talking about like, make sure you get calories in after your workout so that your body can recover, and just saying any calories. And so like, throwing like cookies and Cheez-Its and donuts, like having that after a race also wasn't right. But it was like, I knew that there was a balance to be struck there. I wasn't quite sure how to like, put it all together yet, but I was definitely thinking about it and trying to figure my way into it,
It's cool that you were like aware that was going on, because like you said, most people aren't. And that's just so true, because if you say, like, especially to somebody that's in middle school or high school, like, you make a comment that's even slightly gets them thinking unhealthy about, unhealthy relationship about food and their bodies, you don't know how much that can trigger somebody to go into something super unhealthy. So I think, there does need to be a better system for that, or maybe better training for coaches, or, hopefully that can get improved over time. But that's very, very true. Just a tiny comment, even though I know a lot of coaches are giving a lot more than a tiny comment, could really affect somebody's lives long term.
Totally. Yeah. And as you were saying that, I remembered to go back to your original question. By the time I found a plant-based diet, I really did feel like, I was basically recovered. Like I was not feeling guilty about anything that I ate. I was not that, I guess I never really was feeling guilty. I just was, in that restriction, or in that like overly obsessive about health mindset. And by the time I found a plant-based diet, I really felt like I was really recovered for the most part. But I will also say that I do think that it would also be dishonest to not say that when I found a plant-based diet, like, I think that part of what drew it to me, other than just like curiosity and, the things that I had heard about it, but also the idea of restriction was still appealing to me. And so the idea of having this way of eating where, I wouldn't have to explain why I didn't really want to have like the, heavy cream, or the, like loads of cheese on things, like having like a word to just use, like to say like, oh, I'm vegan. And that would cut out certain foods that I knew I didn't want to eat anyways. I know that was appealing to me. So it would be dishonest to not, say that as well. But at the same time, I was generally in a recovered place, and I can only say that a plant-based diet has been only healing for me ultimately. Like, just the more that I learned, the more I felt so connected to food in such a positive way, and ultimately more connected to the entire earth. Like, the more that you learn about how a plant-based diet is so much more than the relationship between you and food. It's a relationship between you and everyone else on the planet, between you and the planet itself, between you and the animals, it's just like, what we eat is not just, these numbers like calories and protein and carbs and all these macronutrients and micronutrients and whatever. Like, it's fun to learn about that stuff and get into it if you're like sciencey and whatever, but like, there is so much more going on, and it's so much bigger than us. Like, it was so healing for me to recognize that food is this huge thing that can be a political decision, that can be an ethical decision. It can be something that reflects my values. It can be a way to be more in touch with the environment. Like, it's this huge thing that's so much bigger than me. And that was really healing, to recognize that like what I eat isn't necessarily about me at all.
Exactly. Isn't it like, it's super interesting. Like, just, I mean, just bringing that up and how emotional people get about their food, right? Like, if you are trying to help somebody go vegan, or if somebody's not open to it at all, people are very, very emotional about their food. Like, it hits them on a whole, like, other level, like, mentally.
Absolutely. Totally. Yeah. It's one of those topics that it's hard to broach with people sometimes, similar to like politics or religion or any of that stuff. It's really personal.
It is. Like, I don't know. It's just, I know we're both on the same page now, but it's it's kind of funny though that somebody could get offended about you'd rather have like a banana, right? Like, it just
right.
it blows my mind. But that's really amazing. So, like, once you started obviously implementing that, you're seeing the positive changes. I mean, where did that take you? Because obviously, you ended up on board with, the amazing guys over at Mastering Diabetes. But I mean, how did that even progress over time to get in there?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, I went all in. Like, when I first started eating a plant-based diet, I just loved it. And the more that I learned, like I said, I just got all into it. And then when I saw Forks Over Knives, like right when it first came out on Netflix, I saw Forks Over Knives. And that just, like, after I watched that movie, I swear, that hour and a half or however long the movie is, like, when that movie ended, I was like, not only is this, what I want to do for myself for the rest of my life, but I need to figure out how to share this information with as many people as possible. Like, this is what I want to do, is just figure out how to get this information out to people. So I started reading, like, I went on Amazon and I remember buying like the books from every single person that was featured in that film. And I like wrote emails to like Dr. Furman and PCRM and Engine 2 and, Pam Popper and all these different people to see if I could come, help out in some way or work with them and learn from them and intern and do something, shadow, and then I actually did end up going and shadowing Pam Popper. And then that summer, after all of that happened, was the first plant stock event, which is like the Forks Over. It was at the time a partnership between Forks Over Knives and Engine 2. And I went to that event and I talked to, and oh my gosh, it was so funny. It was like, I went there with two of my friends, and I swear we were the only people that were under the age of 45. And then, there were maybe like two other little kids whose parents had dragged them, but like we had brought our parents. So it was just, it was funny to be there. But
that is funny.
I went up and talked to Rip Esselstyn at one point and just, took a brave step and basically went up to him and said, like, I want to help. How can I help? Like, what can I possibly do? And I don't think he took me very seriously at the time. I don't know if he even remembers this. I should ask him. But he basically told me to just, email them and state that I wanted to help. And if anything came up, they would let me know. And when I did email them, they responded and said, you know what? We have a blog that we're trying to, get up and running. And if you would want to write, an article or two for us about what it's like to, be like from the college student perspective, that would be great. So two of my friends and I, the two friends that had gone to Plant Stock with me, we wrote an article and then we wrote another one. And eventually it became like we were writing once a week blog posts for them. And we were dedicated to it. We made it like a job. We had our little Skype calls once a week where we would like edit each other's writing and submit it and give each other feedback. And so I guess, Engine 2 was really impressed with that. And we ended up doing an internship with them. And from there, it just got the ball rolling. I ended up doing an internship with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And then from that internship, I had one semester left of school after that, but after I did that semester of school, a job opening came up at PCRM, and I applied and I got the job. And so I was actually Dr. Barnard's personal assistant for 2 years. And I also oversaw a couple of like nutrition projects and helped to organize the medical conference that they host every summer. So that was just, the most incredible experience and got me even more into all of this. I just keep digging a deeper hole for myself within all of this. Like, I'm so into it now, but I left PCRM thinking that I was preparing to go back to grad school to be a dietitian. And in the meantime, I got a part-time job with Forks Over Knives. And then somewhere along the way, about a year and a half ago, I started questioning, all of that. Not all of it, but questioning whether RD was really the route that I wanted to take in all of this. And I guess to get to where Mastering Diabetes came in, I met Robbie at a nutrition conference and just went up to him and was just fascinated by how he was managing his type 1 diabetes while eating an abundance of carbohydrates, because there's a lot of information out there about type 2 diabetes, but I didn't really know that much about type 1. And so we sat down together and had lunch and just really hit it off, and we stayed in touch. And I just loved what Mastering Diabetes was doing. And when they were organizing their first summit and were like really getting started and kicking things off, I just, offered my help through working with Dr. Barnard. I had been in touch with a lot of people in the movement. And so I had a lot of contacts that I was able to help get them in touch with to get speakers for the summit. And I'm just I believe so deeply in what Mastering Diabetes is doing and the way in which they're doing it and spreading these messages. And sorry, I don't know if you can hear a dog barking in the background. My neighbor's dog is barking, but
it's all good.
Yeah, I'm so in love with what Mastering Diabetes is doing, and the integrity in which every single person on that team is working from. Like, all of us are doing it from a place of passion and love and nothing else. Like, it's amazing. So anyways, when I decided I was no longer actually going to go to grad school and was figuring things out about like, what do I want to do instead? And thinking through like potential PhD programs and a different route, Robbie came to me and said, hey, like, if in the next year, while you're figuring out your alternative route here, if you would be interested in working full-time with Mastering Diabetes, we would love to have you. So I went from just doing like some contracting work or just being like in general their biggest supporter and fan to then having a full-time role with them. And it has been so incredible. My heart is breaking to be potentially leaving. To be actually leaving. I say potentially just because I know I'll be involved in some way always. But, I'm leaving my role with them to go back to school in like a month and a half here. And so I'm so emotional about it. It's been the most beautiful thing to be part of this team and to be part of, the entire process. Like, when I first started working with Robbie and Cyrus, things were just getting off the ground. Like, Mastering Diabetes was just an idea that, Robbie was still working at Forks Over Knives when I first met him. And now he, left that role to then start Mastering Diabetes with Cyrus. And, it's been really incredible and beautiful to watch that process unfold. I was with them when they, we're setting up the website and switching the YouTube channel over to a new name. And I was with them when they launched the coaching program to be a subscription service where it was only $29 a month. And, it's been so just awesome in all of the ways to witness their journey and to be part of it. And I'm just so grateful.
Experience. Like, what you've learned in that process too, I'm sure just amazing. And quick shout out to Robbie and Cyrus. They came on the podcast a while back. So if you haven't listened to that, go listen to their story as well. They talk a lot about Mastering Diabetes. But yeah, they're amazing. But that's really cool, Tara, that you really got to be there for that whole process and help and learn. And I mean, it's only going to help you as you progress with your own path. And like, That's just amazing.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I don't even remember what the initial question was or whether I just decided to ramble on, but there's my story.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, do you want to talk for a second about what you're actually going to be going to school for?
Yeah, so I'm going to Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona. So I'll be moving at the end of July to Flagstaff, and it's an interdisciplinary health program. So it bridges public health, public health, psychology, and sociology. And obviously there's a lot of nutrition wrapped into that, but there's, these different specialties that you can do within it. There's 3 different paths you can take. And so I'm going to do psychosocial health. So really looking at the emotional and psychological factors that play into our overall health. And where that really came from is that, like I just outlined, like for the first 5 or 6 years that I've been, doing this, working in this field, I've been really looking at the nutrition side, this lifestyle medicine approach. Through, educating people about the science of how a plant-based diet heals the body and helping them to navigate the dietary change, I've witnessed hundreds of people reverse diabetes and heart disease and lower cholesterol and lower blood pressure and, reduce or eliminate medication needs, gain energy, get their life back. But I really felt like I was going to, like I said, I wanted to be a dietitian. I thought I was going to help save the world by teaching this science of plant-based nutrition. But what I've learned is that even fully understanding what is healthy to eat is not enough in most cases.
Right.
Like, it takes very little time to actually explain the basics of sound nutrition. Basically eat plants in their most unrefined form or as close to their unrefined form as possible. Like, in general, that's kind of it. And, you can get into the nuances and like the details in comparison to this approach versus another one, and like gut health, and do you need XYZ and all of the micronutrients, you can get into that. But for the general person, if you just, try and eat as many plants as possible and try and eat it in its most natural form as possible, you're going to be healthy. But the complexity and challenges that hold people back from actually executing what they know is best for them comes from the psychological and emotional world that we're living inside our minds. So this is an area where I feel like there's a gap, and I know that there are people talking about it. There's Doug Lyle, and there's people who are taking this approach of really looking at the psychology, but I just feel like this is the area where I'm seeing a need for more attention, but also where I have the most to give.
Right. And you've lived it.
Right. So, and there are lots of people out there who are incredibly intelligent and can explain the science and practical how-to in both intricate and easy to digest ways. Cyrus and Robbie. Cyrus is so freaking brilliant, and the way that he can understand, the science of insulin resistance, but then break it down into ways that are so easy to understand for the general person is incredible. And there are lots of resources out there where people are really giving you the how-to, giving you the grocery lists, and teaching you how to meal prep and all that stuff. And I love talking about all of that stuff, that practical information. But where I feel like I have something unique to contribute that's not already being talked about by someone who can talk about it just as well or better than me is this, this emotional side of it, the feelings that come up or hold us back, and the conversations that we have with ourselves in our minds. And so that's really what I'm looking at. And I mean, my theory is that in order to be sustainable, lifestyle change must be grounded in self-love. Because often people start becoming interested in adopting healthier lifestyle habits from a place of fear or pain. And pain is a great motivator. It really is helpful for showing us this that you're doing right now is not working and something needs to change. And that's wonderful. But pain is only a good motivator in the short term. And that's, like we were saying at the beginning, because change is painful too. And so the pain of what we've always known is less scary than the pain of something new, because it has that added discomfort of it being novel to us. So what I am hoping to study is, all sorts of things. So I really want to look at, the interplay between physical health with our mental and emotional health. But something in particular that I feel myself really wanting to look at is the relationship that we have with ourselves and how that affects all of this. And kind of like the role of self-compassion in building that foundation for sustainable lifestyle change.
I love that. I mean, I think that's amazing. And I think, that you're 100% on the right track, because it's definitely something that's not covered enough, or you don't see it out there enough, because like you said, it's the changing your lifestyle and your overall mindset and mental health. It's so interconnected, and just the ability to even start or stay sustainable, or if you get off track, to be able to jump back on track. Like all of those are mental blocks that people, I think a lot of people are aware of it, but I think there's a lot of times that they don't even realize that that's happening. You know what I mean?
Right. I think that, I see it all the time in like the Mastering Diabetes program, or in other people that I've worked with through my experiences, where it's like, we give them the recipes, we give them the general understanding of like, what foods are healthy and how we, would recommend that they eat. And we teach them, here's some resources, and here's how to, set yourself up for success by planning ahead and packing your lunches and, whatever it is. And people want to change. It's not that they don't want to. It's like they know what's healthy. They want to make these changes for themselves, and something still holds them back. And, whether that's conscious or subconscious, it's there. And so what I really want to do is just help people to be able to do exactly what they want to do, help them to stop holding themselves back in ways that they either realize or don't fully realize. And it's so interesting, the different motivations that can be there, or the different patterns of living that we've created based on the understandings that were formed in our childhood and over our lifetimes. And it's a lot of work, and it's scary work to go in and really look at ourselves and see the places in which we've made up these stories that are holding us back, or that we have these patterns that aren't serving us, or, revisiting these things that we believe about ourselves that are painful, or, whatever it is. Like, it's hard work and it's not fun,
No.
but it's so worth it. And it's so incredibly powerful and freeing when you're able to do that inner work. And I really believe that the only way you can actually go in and do that work for yourself is to come from a place of self-love, because you need to feel safe in your own, you need to be able to hold a safe space for yourself to do that. You need to be able to look critically at who you are and be able to see the places in which you are coming up short, or you are, I don't want to use the word flaw and to say like, we are all perfectly imperfect, right. But where, the places in which you want to make changes, and you can't look critically at yourself in full honesty if you don't feel like it's safe to be who you are. So I really feel like that radical self-acceptance has to be there. It has to be the foundation that is built first before you can actually look at who you are and look internally and, create that safe space. And I really do think, that's what makes this sustainable. You have to be able to, we aren't perfect. We are all human. And so part of the human experience is, dealing with the feelings that come up. And there are so many feelings that come up when not only are you changing your diet, but it's affecting your social circle, it's affecting your relationships, it's affecting your self-identity. All of those things are really big parts of this dietary change. And I think that we sometimes skip over them. Like we talk about like, oh, sure, like when you're, you're at a family gathering, like, there are certain approaches that are like, make really little of it and just act like it's not a big deal. And there are other approaches like talk to your family members and tell them like, I want you to support me in this. This means a lot to me. And, there are different approaches to deal with whether it's a social situation or, whatever it is. But I think that it's important to recognize how big those actually are for people. Like those emotional experiences that we live through are huge. And it does affect your relationships. If you have, if you have a parent who like their love language is making big meals for you and suddenly you don't want to eat their food, that really affects your relationship with them. Or, if you've always been the overweight person and a lot of your family is also overweight, and then, you might be having this fear that if I lose weight, they will think I'm better than them. And like that will potentially put my relationships in danger. Like there's so many things that can come up. Right. And I feel like it's really important that we talk about the feelings and the emotional side of things and how we think about ourselves, how we relate to ourselves. Like, I just think there are so many conversations that aren't being had, and it creates this dialect that people have in their minds thinking they're alone when they're not alone. This is such a shared experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think all of that's amazing. And I know you're going to be able to reach a lot of people. Like, do you have, I know this journey is so new for you, but like, do you have any kind of idea in your head, like where you want it to go? Like if you want it to be a coaching program for yourself, or if it's going to be like an add-on to mastering diabetes, or like do you have any like inkling to where you'd like it to go?
So the answer to that question is yes. And it's one of those things where I mean, my close friends and I talk about this, but I get nervous saying it to like wide audiences, but it's good for me. It's a good practice for me to do it, because the reason why we have that fear, and, I'm sure other people feel similarly about like, stating their health goals wide, like I'm going to lose 100 pounds or I'm going to start eating a whole food plant-based diet or whatever. When we make those big claims about what we want, it's so scary to put yourself in that place of like potentially not reaching that. But right. I think it's also important to state the intention and to put it out there and to recognize that if it doesn't happen for whatever reason, it's okay. And like, there's no point of ultimate failure unless you're actually not trying. So
yeah,
I will say that like
stone regardless.
Yeah, I will say that it makes me nervous to put this out there, but at the same time, I actually am very clear in where I see myself going. I would say I definitely have learned that things change along the way. And so I'm totally open to, allowing the flow of life to guide me where I end up, and, to be able to follow what feels most important and exciting to me at the moment. But as of right now, I really see myself kind of being, are you familiar with the work of Dr. Brené Brown?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So
amazing.
Yes. I really, she's like such a huge inspiration to me. And I basically want to have a similar approach that she does, in which like I'm doing research and I'm creating these like I'm putting on paper through quantifiable studies, like what can actually happen when certain techniques are applied, and how, mental health and physical health are all related, and how it's interwoven and how it affects one another. So I want to do research, and from that place, I want to write books to share this. I love writing. I love writing. So I see myself doing a lot of writing and writing books and sharing that information with people in a digestible way. So like doing the science and doing the research so that it is credible, and like, so that it's credible, and so that it can be respected, and so that I can use it to inform whether it's like medical centers or physicians or other researchers or whatever, like having that quantifiable evidence-based research, but then at the same time, turning that into something that is widely digestible for the public, for people to apply into their own lives if they want to just take, a personal self-help perspective, just to like take in that information and utilize it on their own. I also, I enjoy talking to others and doing public speaking. I love the interpersonal connection. So I would want to do like retreats and things like that. And if I have a PhD and I'm doing research at likely a university, then also being a professor and being able to work, they're starting to question things. They're starting to come into their own identity and let go and like kind of unlearn those things that they've been just brought up with, and starting to question things and just like look at the world from a new perspective and kind of broadening their unboxing themselves and broadening their horizons and learning what they're really interested in. So anyways, so basically that mix of like professor, researcher, writer, doing workshops and retreats and things like that. And, I have like other like little projects here and there that I really want to work on, including some things within the eating disorder community actually. But yeah, so that's a very general, broad perspective of what I feel like I want to be doing. But I also feel it's like this thing where it's like it feels broad and like kind of airy and cloudy and like fuzzy, but also I have so much clarity about it as well.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And that's amazing, all of that. And I will definitely be buying a book once you get that first one out. So
thank you. That means a lot.
Keep me posted. But no, that's awesome. And I know you just covered a lot of future stuff. Was there anything else that you're maybe doing in the future that you just want to put out there and you share with the audience just to be keeping an eye out for, or just continue to share your journey and put out positive content?
I mean, yeah, sure. I would say that, if anyone isn't following me on Instagram, like that's where I'm really putting my words out and really just sharing day to day the things that I think are important, not only for, I write about the things that I know that I have needed to hear or do still need to hear and need reminders of. And I have a newsletter list where I send out journal prompts and things like that. And if anybody wants to work personally with me, I do offer coaching. Most of that tends to be looking at our relationship with food and our relationship with ourselves. I mean, it's funny. I do talk about food with a lot of the people that I work with, but a lot of the times people come to me thinking that, I'm going to help them to talk about food. And then we end up mostly talking about feelings and what else is going on mentally. But if any, all of that is there, and I'm sure I'll be doing some other things while I'm in school. But also I know that when I start school, it's going to be intense and it's going to be a lot of work. So we'll see what else is coming up in the meantime. I really want to start doing retreats sooner rather than later. But none of that is planned at the moment. It's all just, ideas floating around. So yeah, those are some things that are going on right now if anybody's interested in connecting with me in those ways.
That's awesome. You mentioned your Instagram account. What is your Instagram name? That way people can find you on there.
Yeah, it's just @ and then my name, Tara Kemp, and there's an underscore after Kemp.
Perfect. And Tara, just closing question that I ask every guest, but if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's been something that's been your own takeaway through your wellness journey so far, but if you just had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
If I had one piece of advice to give, that would just be that I think that it is incredibly valuable to start to nurture that relationship with yourself and try to come into a place of feeling like you are your own sanctuary and safe space in which you, for yourself, having relationships with friends or family members that can mirror to us how wonderful we are, or who can provide comfort and feedback, like that's all so valuable. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to come home to yourself. And there is nothing, in my experience, nothing more healing than being able to be your own voice of wisdom and your own voice of comfort. And I know that so many of us have that inner critic, that's not necessarily going to go away, at least, definitely not in a short amount of time. But being able to catch that voice and then stand up for yourself and remind that voice that those things, that shame that we feel, that, you know, we always deserve to be forgiven. It is always okay to make mistakes. It is always okay to not be okay, and be able to remind ourselves that we are always whole, that we are always worthy, that we are always lovable. And yeah, just being able to reframe that conversation that we have with ourselves, that will change your life more than anything else. And it is so worth starting to try and make that happen for yourself.
Absolutely. No, that's perfect, Tara. And just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm excited just to follow your journey and for other people to follow yours as well. And just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I loved having you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been great to connect with you a little bit more, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Tara. She's doing so much positive work, so be sure to give her a follow on social media to keep up with everything that she's been working on. You can find her social media links that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drkcjohnson.com. That's drkaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, websites, all of that. So all of Tara's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Tara, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Also, be sure to check out patreon.com/drkcjohnson to learn how you can support the Unlock Wellness podcast. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you loved it. I hope it inspires you. And most importantly, I hope you take action.